Thanks for joining me today, Rhodri. Today I'm speaking to Rhodri Jones. So for those that don't know, Rhodri used to be a professional footballer, previously played for Man United at youth level. How's it going, Rhodri? You okay?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Appreciate your time. So obviously you're aware of the podcast. We had a chat off air, and obviously the podcast is geared towards speaking to people like yourselves about their transition away from sport to another career, and obviously making people outside of the sport, or even within sport, whether you're an athlete or kind of a coach or whatever it may be, making sure that people are aware that athletes do have transferable skills which are suited to other careers and not just necessarily sport. So, how's life at the minute? How's things for you? What are you up to nowadays?
Yeah, life's good. Well, I've started a mind fitness coaching company, so I kind of work with. It's usually your overthinkers or your high achievers or your kind of curious types who find out they're coming against their edges and they've got a curiosity to find out why. Really, I've been working with some athletes, and we alluded to this, in our pre-podcast chat. But I do sense there's a willingness, especially with young athletes, to explore a different way to be. The topic of mental health is a big thing at the minute, but I think there's a way to look at it in a positive light and look, with those who are not suffering from a recognizable cognitive disorder, but for those who kind of just want to explore a different way to be, really.
That's interesting. You mentioned there kind of you work with a lot of youth with regards to kind of the mental attitude, the mental approach to kind of day-to-day life, really. So obviously now, in terms of kind of the media, people coming out and expressing their feelings with regards to kind of mental health, mental ill health, obviously that's going to bode well for the younger generation coming up, because obviously that's kind of what we're here for. So youngsters of the future, to a certain degree. We're obviously getting older, our time's kind of gone. So what do you think, I touched on it there really, what do you think are the reasons for kind of youngsters nowadays being more intrigued with regards to the mental elements of kind of sport?
I honestly think, there's a lot of noise out there for young people, with social media and stuff. But within that noise and all their access to wonderful resources, and I think you've got podcasts like yourself and or even the kind of like stuff like your Joe Rogan podcasts and a lot of American ones, and even the British ones now, who are kind of exploring these different ways to be and stuff. And I think if you are that curious kind of got that kind of curious attitude, there's no excuses in a way, because you've got access to these resources. If the resources out there, it's just maybe there's a scarcity of maybe those youngsters who take it off their own back and explore, really. So I think there's definitely a willingness to explore a little bit more, I think.
And what do you think about, let's call it the older generations, the ones who are kind of in the early stages of their professional career, middle, and also the latter stages? How have you kind of approached that? Do you deal with any players or athletes within that kind of remit or not?
Yeah, a few. Obviously anyone can benefit from mind fitness work. You can rewire the brain at any stage of life, neuroplasticity. But what probably happens, the longer you go in life, you've been skiing down the same path in your mind. It's like you can still change, but you've obviously got to be more open to new ideas, really. Because I think what happens is people go through school not maybe really understanding their mind in terms of that inner voice and the beliefs you have about yourself. And what you have in maybe elite environments, and you're like your entrepreneurs, people are really pushing, business leaders, they're coming up against their edges a little bit more, I think. So I think that's what maybe you find out. Like for me, it was certainly a case, in my football career. I based now on a career that I had to retire when I was 24, and the words of the knee consultant was, "Rhodri, you got the knee of a 50-year-old ex-footballer at 24."
Wow.
but I still think my lack of psychological fitness had a bigger impact on my life
Right.
compared to injuries, and that I can't say it clearer than that, to be honest.
Yeah. Geez. I want to touch on that in a second, but you mentioned there, obviously, we all know that the brain's a muscle, and obviously, because we played sport, we generally hear about kind of muscle memory and things like that. So I haven't kicked a ball for, I'd probably say, nearly 10 years now. But I know if someone kicked me a ball, I'd be able to control it based on muscle memory and things I've learned whilst I was playing. So are you saying now, the older you get, is it maybe harder to change your ways in terms of kind of how you mentally approach things, as opposed to if you're maybe a 10, 11-year-old or 15-year-old?
Well, it's a weird one. When you're working with younger people, it's like, yeah, they haven't built the ideas about themselves that maybe, you know, they haven't got the memories and that they're basing their future on. But then when you're younger as well, you do benefit from the stuff that doesn't go right in life, and those kind of like, so it's a weird balance really, where you kind of you want them to explore for themselves and not just believe what you tell them, but it's kind of them realizing that they're going to have challenges in life and not tripping themselves up by adding stuff through their thinking or the beliefs they have themselves. I think once you can kind of like shine a light on those, and knowing that you're still going to trip yourself up, you know, like youngsters, you know, they're still, the brains are still maturing in terms of like their thinking capacity.
Yeah.
Till they're 25 really. So when you have adults looking back and trying to like speak rationally to youngsters, and you're like, yeah, but their brains are like a little bit a different stage of development compared to yours. I think, you know, all it is as you get older, our brains are trying to predict the future based on the past. Now, if you've got a lot of like stuff that you haven't really processed in your past, then it's gonna be a self-continuing prophecy in a way, because you're basing your future, and you know, like we're trying to based on what's happened in your past, and then you know, the more you realize, well, that's just a story you're telling yourself, and it might feel real in your own head, but then that, you know, that's what I kind of do really, is like you shine a light on certain things, you join the dots about what's going on, and people can only be made responsible to that, what they're aware of. Once you've joined the dots with someone, then the onus is on that person to take full responsibility. But what I'd say is like, it's obvious when you know, like when someone's trying to light something, you go, oh yeah, it's so obvious when I hadn't thought of it like that. It's like, yeah, that's all the point. It's the same as like when someone, the whole thing when, you know, you see someone who's takes their own life and has got, you know, the life in front of them, and people can't believe and said, oh, well, that person never let on. That's the whole point, isn't it? Is that if that person had let on earlier, then it might have been avoided, or life isn't clear cut like that, and it is going to be challenging. Anyone who paints a picture of life as like this, you know, it can be murky at times. It can be like you're feeling your way around the dark. So at least not try and trip yourself up. You know, add your own like layers to it. That's kind of unnecessary, really.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting stuff. And again, I want to kind of dive a bit deeper into that a bit later on. You mentioned earlier that kind of you retired through injury, and you said you had obviously knee injuries and things like that. So talk to me about your transition period. Like, how was that for you?
Yeah, I don't know how it was for you, because my knee had kind of like, I'd had periods of, you know, I was at Man U and I'd like suffered horrendously with knee problems, then kind of joined Rotherham, and I don't think I really recovered from the experience of being let go by Man U. I do honestly think I'd suffered an element of trauma, but I didn't know at that time. I was a 20-year-old boy, didn't really have that kind of psychological support, so kind of left your own devices really. So I mean, I joined Rotherham, and it was a dressing room with big characters in there. But I kind of didn't really recover really, and had like dark times there with depression, and then kind of ended up still, my knee was still playing up there. So kind of there was that idea of like, oh well, I'm 2021, and this knee is just like, it's going to be a tough career if I'm trying to, like, you know, it's swelling up all the time. So honestly, when, you know, I was playing semi-professionally at the time, you know, I'd kind of left for them. I basically told them to rip up my contract. Went to do a business degree. while playing semi-professionally, and then but that kind of caught up with me. So when I had to retire at 24, and honestly, it was to start off, it was a sense of relief. It was like, oh, I'm not going to have to worry about my knee, because I was playing on a Saturday and it was still trying to get swelling down the next Saturday. So I was like, oh yeah, it's just a bit of relief. But then suddenly, a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, month, I was still training equally as hard in the gym with nothing there, and then you lose that kind of sense of that social connection in the dressing room, and then suddenly I was kind of like, oh yeah, wow, I've wrapped up a lot of my identity in football. I don't really know who I am. I'm kind of like, when I was 5 years old, my first teacher put on my school report, good luck with the football. So for me, I was like Rhodri the footballer rather than Rhodri who expressed himself through football. So you're attaching yourself to that identity. So I mean, what I did, I was like, still had the kind of drive, and I worked my way working into the television industry. So I speak Welsh as well, so I worked in the Welsh language TV industry, working on documentaries and stuff like that. But I was kind of like, how guys maybe more than like I didn't let off any emotion when I had to retire. I just parked it, compartmentalized, and go, right, reframed it. At least I kind of reframed it in a way. I said, well, I've had to retire, but at least I've got legs. At least I can, which is great on one level. It can, it can keep you operating. But I don't think I kind of really looked at the emotional impact and that, like you say, that sense of identity. So I kind of like, I turned to stoicism books, which are very handy when in times of adversity, because very direct and kind of control what you can control, and like what we just said about reframing situations to put a different spin on things, which can be handy. But probably parked a lot of it as well then. So I kind of like, I was successful in TV, but then I kind of have this feeling like this sense of emptiness, and I was like, oh well, I was always trying to fill it with external stuff. I was like, oh well, I work in TV and I'm doing pretty well. It still feels empty as well. Maybe it's like when I get the right woman, and I've met my wife, who I'm still with now, I was like, but there's still a sense of emptiness. And then I was like, maybe it's when you have kids, and I had like 2 kids, and I was like, still had that sense of emptiness. And I love my kid, it's a weird thing. I kind of like disconnected a bit. I think when I kind of, probably when Siraj first released me, it was a sense of like, oh, you're not good enough as a person. And then when I had to retire at 24, it was like a sense of, oh, well, that's it now, that's as good as it's going to get. And once you plant those seeds and you're operating from that place, you kind of lose, you lose the joy for life a little bit. You kind of just, I don't know, it's just like, you probably part of you, like, I don't want to, you put on the barriers of, I'm not going to be hurt again, and you kind of just like operating, and I've got that natural drive and that curiosity, so you're kind of always going to find success externally somewhere, but it was coming from a place of lack, rather than, like when you're doing something just like for the fun of it, in terms of like as an expression, I'm okay as I am, as an expression of who I am. So I basically had 2017, I was basically quite ironic. I was working on a documentary on a Welsh champion bodybuilder, he's like a Mr. Olympia champion. So he's out in America. He's a guy called Flex Lewis. Like he's a huge guy, like great guy. But I was like working on a documentary. I was meant to go out to film with him in Florida and Vegas, which you think those are dream locations. But I was like, I just had my second son, and I was pushing myself. I was still like just spinning my wheels a little bit, because I wouldn't really turn inward. So I ended up like in a GP room in 2017, and I honestly, it was like, like how in football sometimes you have to change tactics, and it was like, well, your tactic of being, I think my approach in life up to then had been, I was a perfectionist who was really hard on himself. So then you throw those two together, and then you're kind of like you're beating yourself up for trying to reach a state that's unattainable in the first place.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like, so I just changed tactic. I thought, what if I just became gentler with myself and welcome everything in life rather than think I've got control life and get everything like I wanted. Like, just trust life, rather than, I'll still try and do what I do in life. But it was kind of like, it was finally like the signs like, well, yeah, up until that point, I thought it's selfish to look inward. I thought you always have to put everyone else first without that realization that, it's not selfish to put yourself first. It's maybe the most selfless thing you can do in the long run, because you're radiating on a different energy with people around you, and I think that's what I did. And I was kind of, at that time I was thinking, do you want, you've got this wonderful opportunity with two young boys. Do you want to be a father who's disconnected, or do you want to be someone who kind of like turns inward and regains his joy for life, really? And so it's probably been a period of like contemplation, reading, meditating, and then suddenly, rather than trying to be resilient and trying to be happy, you're stripping away a lot, and suddenly it kind of just happens organically, really. So, and then so I set up the Mind Fitness company this year. I've done a couple of certifications as a NLP practitioner, which is neuro-linguistic programming, which looks at the effect of what's going on under the bonnet of your behaviour, looking at what's driving your behaviour, really, the kind of words, the language you use, and I've added to that like a psychological fitness specialist certificate. But honestly, they're useful, and you learn some things, but I don't think you can replicate that life experience and being able to just be present with someone. They say a lot in those kind of changing relationships, or those one-to-ones, probably about like 15%. It's something like 15% is the techniques, and the majority of it is just holding space with someone, and just like, making someone felt really heard and valued. And I'm naturally sensitive. I'm naturally curious with people. That's why I think I work in TV, because I'm curious about what drives people. And I've got that experience of when your mind works against you. And so I just think, like, without being like too what's the word, like feel, I feel like I've got some kind of responsibility, really. I mean, a lot of people were going to me like, oh, well, with your story, why didn't you just go to academies and tell your story? I was like, yeah, and raise awareness and stuff. Yeah, that can be useful, but that's just my story. It's like, for me, it's more about being able to actually be of help with people. And I've got that kind of experience and of being in those kind of environments. So how it is with athletes, it's like that trust issues, like they'll test and they're like, at least they know, well, I didn't reach the heights of football, but I've kind of been in and around there. But that by itself isn't enough. I don't think it's I kind of take the work seriously, but I think it's a wonderful opportunity, really. For me, if someone had said to me, when I was 15, 16, said, those thoughts, they're not quite what you think they are. They're not like, you're not there, consciously producing these thoughts. They come and go. Whereas I was like so tied to my thoughts, and thought, even if I had like a negative thought about myself, I thought it was some inherent weakness in myself, without realizing everyone has those thoughts. But you know how it is. It's like that invisible. You can look in the dressing room, can't you? And you can see, that guy's been working out. He's got the six pack. He's got the curls, but this invisible thing. And in the dressing room, like, everyone has a bunch and stuff. And then if you sat like those 11 guys or whoever in the dressing room individually, the outward behaviour might not exactly match what's going on. And I think, like, of course, there's always a bit like your outward behaviour it's always going to be a little bit different to your inward, but the more you can bring that closer, or you inquire, well, why does it feel like you have to put on this like persona, the more then you're being authentic. Like, people say, well, just be authentic, but look at the reasons why you're not authentic in the first place. Like, be resilient. look at the other reasons why you're not resilient, rather than trying how to be present. It's like, yeah, but your mind's trying to pull you this way and that, so let's look at that first, and then you maybe naturally find you're a little bit more present, I guess. That's my approach anyway.
Amazing. I mean, very interesting stuff there. And again, I picked up on so many things that you mentioned. You mentioned, obviously, you've got that natural curiosity within your personal, personality trait. And you said you've done a lot of things, so like media side of things, and obviously what you're doing now with regards to kind of the mentoring side and things like that, which is really interesting. So, what transferable skills have you kind of taken from your life within football into kind of what you've done in the past and what you're doing now as well?
I honestly think it's all the footballers, right? When you're younger, you look statistically at your chances of making it, okay. If you were looking at rationally, no one had ever tried in the first place. So even just trying, some people fall, most people fall by the wayside, but there's something in you. You've got that kind of bravery. You've got that bravery to at least go for it. And you might fall by the wayside, but like people take those for granted. And like, whereas if I've got an empty calendar, I look at it as like, wow, what a wonderful opportunity for the year. Because like, I think what you have with like people from that kind of background, like you say, you pick up these skills of just like, I'm going to follow my curiosity, and you've got that innate, and you might pick up like bits in your career where a manager said like you have a bad outcome with a manager or something that might have an impact and stuff. But I just think like the nature of the kind of people that go into those professions generally, like that obsession. I've still got that obsession now, but it's not. It's knowing I'm okay as I am, and like this obsession is just like. For me, I'm always a bit like how unfortunate if you go through your life without anything to obsess about. Like for me, it's like, maybe they're like being so hard on yourself. Like, but it's just a fine line about if you're being so hard on yourself, you're just battering yourself, and you're just freezing because you're so hard on yourself. But that get up and go and that perfectionist. I mean, if it's the same as perfectionism. If the perfectionism is driven by a sense of lack, thinking like of fear of not being of being imperfect, or where it's like, well, I'm finding my perfections now, but I'm still pursuing perfection, knowing I can't get there, but it's just an expression of who you are. So it's like, it's all about like knowing what's driving it. And I think, those characteristics that you take for granted as in sport, like, don't play yourself down. I think we're quick sometimes, like, especially we're quick to downplay ourselves. It's like, I was speaking to an athlete the other day, and it goes, just want to, I feel cocky, but I can't show that I'm cocky. I said, well, like, we're quick to say you've got to be humble. You've got to be humble. Why do you have to be so humble? Like, like if you're someone who's acting cocky and doesn't quite equate to what's going on inside, maybe you can temper that down. But what about that person inside who, like, I want to say boo to a goose, but inside he has got this cockiness, but he won't give himself permission. It's like you look at someone like Cristiano Ronaldo, like why not? If you believe in yourself, it's like, honestly, I feel like sometimes in dressing rooms and in organizations, like people get a little bit triggered by those who are going, well, no, I believe in myself. I'm good. Like, that you've got that self-belief, because it might reflect where they're kind of triggered and where they don't themselves. So to make themselves better, then they'll try and, like, having the dressing room, someone, maybe someone's like the source of the banter about being busy. That was when I was in the dressing room. Oh, look at him being busy, and it's just like. And for me, I was the mentality was like, I probably conformed a little bit then, because I was like, oh well, I'll just stay in my lane, like I'll stay in my place. And I feel like what I'm saying is, like, don't take on face value what other people's behavior. You never know what really is driving someone else's behavior. All you can ultimately be responsible is for yourself. And I feel like you're not the cause of everything that happens in life, but you've got that responsibility to go, oh, what's been triggered in me? Or what's going on here? Otherwise, you're at the whim of everyone else around you, especially in the dressing room. You might have a manager like who doesn't get you.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, maybe your map of the world's like this, and his is different, and you go, oh, he should be totally like I want him to be, and like that's not life, isn't it? You don't go through life, and you're going to veer towards those who you're on the same wavelength and resonate with, but on that path you're going to come across some people who are just different.
Yeah, definitely, and that's 100% true. So again, I don't know about you. I mean, for me, especially when I was playing, whenever anyone ever spoke about retirement and kind of anything of that ilk, it was always seen as a bit of a negative, or just kind of no one really wanted to discuss it. I'm not saying I was kind of forthright with it or anything like that, but do you think like retirement needs to be approached in a different way? Because I don't see it as a negative thing. And again, everyone's different, so there's no right or wrong here. But if you look at it on paper, so you finish football, if you're lucky, or any type of sport really, you normally finish at around kind of mid-30s, call it that, for argument's sake. And then you've still got a large portion of your life to go and live. So you can obviously use that as a kind of piece of motivation going forward in order for you to maybe prosper elsewhere. And it may not be the first thing you do or the second or third. But for me, it was always kind of, okay, well, retirement, that means I'm getting old and my career's done. And it doesn't really have to be like that. So I don't know. I mean, what do you think on that? Do you think it needs to be approached in a different way?
Yeah, it's a weird one. I think what you have is maybe like a footballer you've experienced. Obviously, I didn't hit the heights, but you can imagine that footballers, you've had these dopamine hits, and you're kind of used to this like bubble and just this like, this intense environment. So you've just got to adapt to your expectations. You adapt what that's why you probably get some who struggle because they're still trying to hit the same. Like still trying to get the same rush and stuff. And you kind of like that. What you might do is trying to have to get your rush from everyday things rather than the peak experiences, so to speak.
Yeah.
But it's a weird one with retirement, because the way I look at it, like you could have someone like, let's say you could have like a doctor or someone successful who's outwardly successful on paper, and then they realize at 40 or 35, right? So let's say that's the ages, roughly 35 to 40 when players retire. They might have that realization they're in the wrong profession. They're on the ladder that effectively they can stay until retirement age.
Yeah.
But I know some people who've got into profession because I think they should. When they were younger, they're like, or maybe the parental voice or the authority voice. So, well, I happen to be good at this, but I don't really enjoy it. But they talk themselves into a career.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes like people think, like the footballers think, oh, well, I'm having to play catcher. Well, yeah, maybe to some degree, but don't assume that everyone who's like on that career progression exactly where they want to be. And so it's like sometimes it can take some people 40 years to figure out what they want to do, because you're changing. Like you're not the same when you're, like you look back and you change, don't you? Like someone says, oh, what do I want to do with my life? I'm like as you've got this one decision, but that can change a bit. Like the experiences you have and the people you bump into, there might be like a job that you've never even considered, and then you bump into someone, and it's like, and it plants a seed, and so it's a weird one. I know we spoke about this before the podcast. It's like, it's unavoidable when you're playing. It's just physically. I know players may be playing a bit later now because they've got maybe the information about prolonging careers, but it is a short career, and it's like all depends on like if you're looking for other sources of education, because you're not, like you say, you're not. It's taking your eye off really focusing on football in terms of like giving it everything you've got. Because sometimes you can look at after your football career with a sense of fear, trying to predict everything, and you really don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it all depends what's driving you. I mean, when I was at Rotherham, I was doing like an open uni degree, but that was more it was kind of, I was quite intellectual, and sometimes I just wanted just to engage that part of the brain really. But then, can I say a part of it was like I didn't believe myself to really maximize my, or really kind of unleash my potential in football. I know I had injuries as well, but you can only answer that individually. Like you have to be true to yourself. Like some people are going, yeah, well, it's important to have string to my bows, but deep down they're like, because I don't really believe I can hit the heights that I'm probably capable of. So you can spend so much time sometimes. It's useful to have half an eye in the future, but then you don't know what's going to happen. A few days, like we live sometimes like we're immortal, and sometimes if you had a reminder every couple of weeks of your mortality, it would put life in. A lot of people that go and see like a motivational speaker that puts life in perspective. I'm like, yeah, maybe till the next morning, and then it's a weird thing really, and I feel like that's what maybe coming from that background does give you. Is just like you've widened your scope of what's possible in the world, and you're prepared to like step into situations, and there's nothing stopping you then from taking those skills and stepping in like you've done. It's just like a lot of people do, and it's just that it's maybe just more really like not getting too tied up as your identity as a footballer, and because otherwise you want, what you might have is like someone just holding on to those memories, and you'll see sometimes, like I spoke to someone who works in TV once, and he says like some of the pundits come on and they're rehashing the same stories about that, and obviously memories are golden, but like life moves on as well, isn't it? It's like some people will be like, oh yeah, I wish I just could map out exactly what's going to happen in my future. But isn't that part of the excitement, is that uncertainty of like, as long as you're open to it, some people are just like, I always feel like there's an element of luck in life, but to have that luck, you've got to step into things as well. You've got to put yourself out there, and even players who big names probably have a rude awakening sometimes when they stop, because the doors are always open, suddenly start shutting. But there's other doors to open, isn't there? It's just like it's just staying open, I think, is the key. Is not like shutting yourself off, and then once you start painting the story of like things aren't going to work for me, and I think you're just limiting your world a little bit. And don't get me wrong, you've got to be realistic. If you want to be a doctor or something after retiring, then it's going to take a longer process. But I think it's just more living a life of like, know that it's like not you've been living a life, even because you might have some footballers. I always get some feel of when even in my short career, there's some footballers who didn't want to play the game. They were like just doing it because they happen to have this ability, and they're like, oh, I can't not tell my parents or my friends who'd be dying to be in a position. And some of them just survived the game and would have preferred to do something different. It's like,
it's a strange one you mentioned that. I mean, I was randomly thinking about that the other day. I don't know what made me think about it, but I was thinking there's so many high-profile footballers or athletes. I remember a few when I was playing, and word got around that such and such hates football, and you obviously hear these stories and you palm it off, and then when someone else says it, who's credible, and then it comes from someone else, and you're thinking, wow, he's that good and he hates it. And people on the outside looking in, people won't understand like what that actually means. I mean, I didn't hate the game, and I wasn't like a household name or anything like that, although I had a 15-year career as a pro. But you hear of these kind of players who had sustained careers in the Premier League who absolutely hated playing the game. Now, that doesn't mean to say they went out and didn't perform in training and stuff like that. They still turn up and train and do what they need to do, but they just didn't like the game. But they just had a level of skill and ability that allowed them to sustain that career at that level. It's crazy. It is crazy. Talk to me about your book. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, it's a Welsh language book, so I haven't explored doing it in English because obviously with my Welsh background, it's always going to be easier to sell. Someone who's played for Man U, there's not many Welsh speakers, but yeah, it was a weird thing really. I was 20 years ago I was at United when doing a travel winning season, so but that was kind of like coincidental. My granddad died. And he was he'd written books, so he died a couple of years ago. And the scout who took me to Man U originally passed, and Sir Alex Ferguson was speaking at his funeral, and it was just like those seeds of like, oh yeah, maybe and I always like reading as well, so it felt like natural. I'm pretty good at like spotting what a decent book looks like. But yeah, I kind of written a book, but it was more obviously talking about the psychological side. Obviously the stories about from my time at United and stuff, but I was trying to give psychological insight into the obsession. Like, when I was young, I was just super obsessed with football in terms of like, you probably had like I used to play with my brother and my dad in the back garden, and they'd go in, and 3 hours later I'm still by myself, just in my lost in my own imagination. And honestly, looking back, those are probably my sweetest memories of football. Like just being alone in my own imagination, and what you probably developed then, like football was my safe space. I don't think people realize like what brings some of these players to football. It's like, especially, you might have some people who've like come from troubled background stuff, and then suddenly they're in this place where they can, the rules are clear, and you're expressing yourself, and it can become like addictive. And I think I was just, it was a weird thing really. But then, but at the same side, it was probably like, being really obsessional. And honestly, it was a weird thing. Like signing for Man U was my dream. Okay, and then when I signed like scholarship, I remember me and my friends after GCSEs went on holiday. Okay, and I was like worried. I was leaving home at 16. I'm happy at home. It's like people don't realize. It's like I wasn't coming from I wasn't from a background. I was probably like a young 16-year-old in terms of I wasn't from I didn't have to. I wasn't very streetwise. I was coming from a middle class background. I was worried, but I couldn't talk to anyone. I couldn't talk to my parents. I don't want them worrying, and my friends like they'd swap positions with me. I couldn't. So I was kind of feeling like really low before I joined, and I was like, knowing that you're going into this world, which is a great opportunity, is weird. I couldn't equate both really. So what I've tried to do in the book was just try and give like a psychological insight in terms of like. And what, to be honest, those are probably the parts I enjoyed writing more than most. And my learnings after playing, and
Brilliant. In terms of kind of transitioning from sport to another career, do you think there's more help needed for athletes? I know it's a tough one, and again, it's a hard one to answer, but it's something I always try and kind of get in the podcast, just because I like to hear what people's thoughts are on it.
It's a weird one really, because my transition was like very abrupt, because it was like I went to the manager of Rotherham, so I was 2021 and said rip up my contract because I was in that place. So my transition wasn't mapped out. It was more like a well-being thing really. I'm not sure because I haven't got my like fingers on the pulse at the minute. It's a weird thing. Like you said, there's no right, like at what point do the club, what point does their responsibility with the player finish? It's like, you could say this when the contract ends, like, it's a weird thing, that's what I said about taking responsibility really. Like what you probably have had experiences of players just like procrastinate, or they just put their head in the sand and just kind of like, and you'll have those others who maybe like on the quiet have just been doing stuff and maybe don't go on about it. And then I don't know. What do you feel? You've probably got more experience in terms of like what do you think like where the responsibility lies? It's like,
again, I don't think there's a definitive answer for it. It's just a tough one. I think from a player's perspective, you need to take ownership of your situation that you're in, whether it be you're injured and you can't play again, or you want to retire but you're not sure what you want to be doing, or you know that it's on the horizon and you know what you want to do or you're not sure. Because even if you know what you want to do, it still may not be a success. You may jump into it and think it's not working. Then what? You need to transition off again to some different avenue. So it's a hard one. I think the clubs do have, or someone within the club do need to take responsibility as well, just to make sure that the players are kind of okay. Even if it's just a phone call to say, look, have you got anything sorted, or what are you thinking? Just checking in, because that phone call could aid that player going forward. Okay, well, I'm coming to the end. The club still value me. They've called me off the back of their own kind of willingness to do so. And then that may make that person's day. And then it's like, okay, well, on the back of that, it could be a situation where the phone stops ringing, as you know, and you're waiting for that phone to ring, and then you're thinking, well, what happens now? Because my phone used to ring all the time, and now it's not. So does that mean I'm not valued? It all depends on your personality. I think parents need to play their part, understand their kids. It's a tough one, but getting your kids to open up, understanding obviously where your kids are at with regards to their career and how things are going. Again, it's really tough, and you can't just pinpoint and say you need to do this, because it's just too hard to do that. And you're right in what you're saying. At what point do the club then say, right, we now need to step in, and then we've stepped in, we've said what we've had to say, and now we need to step out? Is that at the end of the contract? Is that a month before? Is it a year before? Is it a month afterwards when they've left? When is it? It's really, really tough.
It's a weird, yeah. I mean, that's like probably there's no answer that we'll probably reach at. But what you said about like trying different things, like the way I see it is like exploring. It's like, yeah, you'll dig a little hole there. Oh yeah, that it's not quite for me, and you'll dig it. And it's best to dig a lot of little holes and then to find that one to like, yeah, I'm gonna dig. Like this is what I'm digging. But where some people will be like, that's what I said earlier about someone who's like, you know, maybe like successful in terms of their, like maybe a doctor or something, then they dug this big hole for themselves, and then suddenly they have this, that's like the midlife crisis or something, where they realize, oh, yeah, I'm in the wrong job, but I can't walk. They paint a picture of like, oh, I can't walk away now because I've got all the trappings around. But that doesn't. You've got to either got to make peace with yourself there, or you just transit. Because I always feel like, you know, it's always different, because we always like live like, you know, we live day to day thinking, oh yeah, it was going to carry on forever. But it's like, well, sometimes what I'll do, I'll just look at my like one, I'll see how do I feel with something, because you might, you know, you always paint to rationalize stuff and go, yeah, well, I've got these like considerations in my life, which, you know, obviously they do come into it, but it's like, but if you never took that opportunity, how would you feel at the end of it? Yeah. Like, do you want to look back and go, well, I wish I'd done that? Well, that time's gone, and I think you kind of intuitively know when something is for you, but it's kind of like being in your own lane and being able to like really realize, like, yeah, this feels right for me, and then might not, like, but you look at other people around you and like, why don't they, like, this is what works for me, and like, well, and then you'll have some people who'll be like, but this is what I really liked me at, but maybe I should be, that should resonate with me. Like, you can't, you know, like, you know, you might do one job, like, you know, you might do what I do, like what I do now, like the mind fitness stuff. Every time I work with a client, I feel alive after, and that for me is like, you know, yeah, you still like, oh yeah, well, you could have, you know, maybe this could have got, you know, like, well, but it's like, it's that felt thing. It's like every day I'm like, you know, the books I read and stuff like, and the podcast I listen to, no one tells me to do those things. It's just like, I've got this innate curiosity for those things, where some people be like, yeah, you like, you probably read stuff that maybe I wouldn't resonate with, and I'd read. So it's like, so for me, it's like, it's a weird thing. Like, if money was no object, you had no kind of any considerations, what would you do? Start from there, yeah, and then look at what's preventing you, and then you kind of shine a light on those things. Like, sometimes people will like talk themselves into like something they don't want to do, and I've done, you know, anything I talk about, I'm not like talking about like I've read it in a book. It's like stuff I've experienced, you know, where it's kind of like, I still work a little bit in television, but I was like, yeah, but I work in television, but all the books I read about like neurobiology, spirituality, philosophy, all kinds of like books that, like, you know, like sometimes my dad comes around to my house sometimes and goes like, I'm not even going to read the back of that. Like, I don't. It's like, but like I said, like, but no one's like told me to do that. And yeah, it is handy to have advice from others, but there's no how to be you. Like, yeah, you can. There's something about reading books and something resonates deeply with you in it. But I always find like it's always helpful if it resonates deeply because it aligns with what your life philosophy is. Or sometimes you can't. I don't think you can kind of. People will fool themselves, but I think you know what's true deep down, and it's just giving yourself that permission to step into it. Because a lot of people are, it's like there's a famous book called The Hero's Journey by I think it's a guy called Joseph Campbell, and it's about like you have this calling, you have something that's calling you into life. Do you step into it? And knowing that you're gonna, there's gonna be trials and challenges, but there's something pulling you towards it, and I feel like that's what I'm doing now. And honestly, I've resisted this. It's like part of me is like, but I can't. Every time I work, that enthusiasm like never wavers. I never have a day where I'm like, oh, I can't be bothered to see this client. Like I treat every client like it's the last I'm ever going to have, and like someone else, you might do what I do, and you're like, oh, God, that's hard work, isn't it? But that's what I say. Like it's a completely individual affair, and I think like I always feel like everyone's got that calling in life, and yes, some might go the whole lifetime, not stepping into it. They place limitations, or there's other factors at play, and some people, come from a background maybe where they unfortunately don't get that. The opportunities don't come their way for different reasons. So I think there's like for me, like the way the brain works, like we're trying to put a story on our lives. But I look back at my life, there's a lot of coincidences and little things happening, and you're kind of trying to put this big story about it. And it's like, or what I'd say is like, you've got to put yourself out. Like you've got to put yourself out there, otherwise, that's not the scaremongering thing. That's just common sense. If you're operating within your this little ceiling, these little then you can blame life and stuff, but there's an element of you that's okay with that, because I think if the itch or the discomfort gets too great, do you do something about it, or I think that's when people start, this disease or chronic illnesses is because they've not in every case obviously, but in a lot of cases is because people have they're not doing what lights them up. And even if you're doing a job that maybe doesn't light you up, but where are you getting that? Where are you finding it in a hobby or something, or on a side venture or something like that? Like obviously you're doing this podcast because you've got that curiosity, and it's a weird thing, really. It's and there's no five-step plan. There's no like I think sometimes there's all these theories and all these, and it's like sometimes I think it's still to try and get like control on a life that's inherently uncertain.
You can't do it. I mean, interesting stuff, and we could talk all day. Things like this, I'm really intrigued, because like there's so many strands and avenues that you can take it, and it's really fascinating to me. Appreciate your time today. Really enjoyed the chat, and again, I'm kind of fond of what you're doing. I think it's amazing stuff. Just before we go, if you want to just let everyone know kind of where we can find you on social media, if you are on there, and also obviously the name of your company, and obviously where we can find you for that as well.
Yeah, it's quite easy. My website is www.rhodrijones.co.uk. So that's RHODRI. I mean, it's not like an ego thing why I've called it my own name, but honestly, for many years in my life, I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. So I thought, you know what, just call it by your own name. And I think I've got a picture of myself on the homepage. So it's not a vanity thing. It's more just, you know what, I don't really care anymore. I'm kind of like, in a way, it's like, but yeah, I think there's links to my, I think I'm on LinkedIn, and I'm more active on LinkedIn than anything else. I'm not really a massive social media person, but you kind of got to play the game to a degree as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Nah, like I said, really enjoyed the chat and appreciate what you're doing. So I'll keep an eye out for obviously success going forward. And like I said, thanks for your time today.
Yeah, no, thanks. Well done for you. Like, because that transition can be a scary proposition, but for athletes seeing what you're doing, and someone will pick up maybe not something that I say doesn't resonate with people, but maybe one of the other guests is like, oh yeah, he's more from my background, or more my path, whereas my path maybe is more suitable for someone else.
Brilliant. Appreciate your time, and hopefully speak to you soon.
Lovely. Cheers, Danny.
Thank you. Bye.